The hijacking of YouTube has its reasons. We're going into a post-human world, and that post-human world, if we see what it is that we're going into, we're going to get scared. And so the human being has to be introduced into that world little bit by little bit by little bit. And so there's a network that works around these ideas that need to be introduced into humanity for the human to make his evolution or transgression into the post-human world and the transhuman world. And all of these networks work together, and YouTube is one of those networks which helps the other networks try to aid and influence the molding of the human into something susceptible for him to allow himself to be led into those worlds. Ultimately, the technological world and the biological world need to mesh together, and we're starting to see words and phrases come out which are suggesting or putting into the global consciousness, into the global vocabulary, gently these words, allowing us to warm up to them. Technology is trying to get us to give up our autonomy over our life, and there seems to be a war between nature and technology. There might not actually need to be a war. Technology's never actually been explained. You know, what actually is technology? Is technology some sort of consciousness from a different plane or from a different dimension? Does it exist in another form somewhere else? If you look at the Platonic archetypes, you can see that there are different worlds that objects and ideas live in that perhaps manifest in this world, and those manifestations only manifest according to the local laws, physical laws present in those dimensions. So for instance, an archetypal object may appear or manifest differently in a different universe with different physical laws. So we've never actually understood actually what technology is, but it could very much be the technicum. It could very much actually be a kingdom. The first kingdom you had was the minerals. From the minerals came the plants. From the plants came the animals. From the animals came the humans. And from the humans came technology. So there is an argument that technology in itself could be a kingdom which has been brought to this world through humans' capacity, their cerebral capacity. And sometimes this technology looks very much like an invasion. During the China War, the Opium Wars, England managed to get the Chinese people addicted to opium. In the war, if it is a war that we're having with technology, the technology is getting us addicted to the technology. Now, England did some very nasty things, but it doesn't mean that England as a whole is a bad country. Just like Germans did some nasty things in the Second World War, it doesn't mean you have to punish the entire country. And so we can see technology doing some very nasty things. But does that mean then that technology has to be punished? Is technology some sort of Luciferian system being introduced into the human world, or is it something that we can work with? The problem with the introduction of technology is that its introduction comes from nefarious, negative places. For instance, most technology that we're getting into the system comes from the scientists making technology for war. So it's seeping in. So this type of war technology is seeping in to our world, and the energy which is attached to the technology, to the algorithms, to the mathematics is dirty, and that dirtiness affects our world. And this is what we're seeing on a spiritual, metaphysical level. Of course, I can't prove it, but this is the logic that I've come up with. The technology is being used to turn us into slaves. That means that technology is part of the prison wall system, and we're building technology, so we're building the walls of the prison, so we're building our own prison, and we don't know what we're doing. As this world which is being built for human evolution into the post-human, into the transhuman world, which may not be bad, it just might be bad what we're being pushed to do. Things don't have to the problem with new things coming in, for instance, like religions, is that they often start off with great ideas. It just happens that other entities enter into those things to invert them. So, for instance, you've got Christianity, and with Christianity, there are a lot of very good ideas at the beginning. However, you get something like the Catholic Church, which then starts inverting those ideas and says that it has patented Jesus, and you can't go to Jesus or Christianity without going through the Vatican or the church. So these ideas, when the church was first set up, it probably had a great set of ideas, but somewhere down the line, because of power And because of negative energies, those ideas get turned against themselves, which is what England did. England as a country, as a whole, the populace in England never wanted to go and invade other countries. But because of a few politicians and because of tradespeople that wanted to make lots of money, they therefore engineered these wars to happen. And so you have to think about technology. Who's engineering technology to invert the system that we live in? And that's a very important point to ask. Technology causes addiction, so do plants, marijuana, cocaine, opium. Those materials, those chemicals come from plants, but we don't say plants are bad. So if technology makes things that we become addictive or addicted to, does it mean then that we have to say technology is bad? No. The fabrication of those plants in a particular way inverts the plant, turns the plant against itself. If you look at, for instance, the cocaine process, you bastardize the plant, you use a lot of chemicals in order to extract the cocaine from the coca plant. And so you can have technology and you can have plants. Both are amoral, but depending on the extraction of the technology that you want and the extraction of the chemical from the plants that you want, you can create something which does harm to humans. And that's what I'm putting forward as my argument and thesis. YouTube was invented. When YouTube first came out, it was a great platform. It had its golden age. However, in the world that we're living in, we are being molded and we're being programmed. We're being slowly atomized and pushed down. And for instance, that's coming from the radio waves, it's coming maybe from the future 5G, it's coming from chemicals in our plants, it's coming from liquids that we inject into our bodies. I don't know what those are. Confusion at school with children over their sexuality. And so from all of these different sides, not one thing can be said to be the ultimate cause, but when you put everything together, then you can see how the molding takes place. And the YouTube which we now have is not the same YouTube as before. And that's why many people are leaving YouTube, because they want to have a social platform. That was what the old YouTube was. I've noticed that technology in its present form, in the form that we've been given, in the form that's been that's come down to us through whatever portals it's being manifested through, for whatever different wars and whatever things that we have. I think the technology that we have, not technology per se, but technology we have, is making us reliant on it, and it's making us what appears to be more stupid. And I'll give you an example. Many times I've got into Uber, and the Uber driver, the first thing he does is he turns the maps on and he follows the map. And a couple of times I've said to him, the journey is twice as fast if you just do a U-turn. And when they realize what they could have done, i.e. just do a U-turn, and they could have saved a lot of petrol and done the journey much quicker, they say, yes. And what it proves is that we as humans are starting to rely on technology far too much. We're starting to trust it, and we're letting our brains rely on it. And that can make us stupid, but more to the point, it can turn us into a slave. We're starting to be told by technology what to do. From a simple map system like Uber Maps or whatever it's called, the maps tells us humans what we should do, and we don't think. We're starting to resign our capacity to think to technology, and that's very dangerous, because there'll come a time where, well, if we do not think for ourselves and we allow the technology to think for ourselves, we'll be taken down a road that we may not want to go down. And that is exactly what I think is happening, and what YouTube is there to do. The nature of YouTube is to help the radiation, the chemicals, and all of those things to mold us. It's the information that we're being given. YouTube used to have original content. It doesn't anymore. YouTube used to have freedom of speech. It doesn't have that anymore. So what we're being given is not actually the truth. It's a biased truth. In effect, YouTube doesn't want humans to think. YouTube is working in cohorts with the other technologies, and it's trying to give us information which is biased. It fills our minds with silly things, more cat videos, more badass videos, more people doing stupid things from the Logan brothers, or Paul Logan, whatever his name is, Logan Paul. And YouTube is becoming an anesthetic to life. Life is becoming more stressful, life is becoming more technological, and we're becoming addicted to our appliances, for instance, telephones and computers. Now, if you become addicted to those appliances, and YouTube is part of the Facebook, Google, and TikTok application networks, because we're addicted to the telephone, and the telephones are usually full of those applications, we're being bombarded with those applications and the informations from that, and then that will create a programming and a molding. YouTube is there to distract us as the preparation for the post-human world takes place. YouTube is there so that one day when it's too late, we wake up and we say, what happened? And YouTube was the thing, or part of the plan, in order to make us sleep. At the moment, we want to watch videos on cats and dogs and, funny things that happen, while your daughter, is at school being told that, perhaps that she's a man and that she's confused. You're busy looking at, people jumping into swimming pools with motorbikes. When your culture is being attacked because, for instance, maybe, you're white or you're straight, YouTube is saying that's okay. And so while you're being trained to accept those new ideas, which is basically to atomize the human, and it's to divide the human, so the human becomes unable to think, and the human becomes depressed, and the human sets himself against other people. So the whites against the blacks, the straights against the bisexuals, the women against the transsexuals. And what you'll create and what you get is lots and lots and lots of division, so that you become atomized, so that when the technology and these networks start to attack you, you're not within a group or a community that can help the defense with the resistance. So it's basically about attacking. At the moment, there's a large attack against, for instance, white guilt and white privilege and being straight. And when those things have been attacked enough, if they win, they'll go on to the next people. They'll go on to the people that are bisexual. They'll go on to the people that are coloured. YouTube is allowing history to be rewritten. This is something straight out of 1984, where bits of history start to go missing. YouTube, it says what it likes and what it doesn't like. So when you go to YouTube to look for certain things, you can't find them, which means that you may not think that they exist. And also other ideas and ideologies may be pushed onto you because they're trending, which will make you believe that they are more important than perhaps than they actually are. And then what happens is that starts to program your mind and mold your mind and create a perception of reality. And then that perception modifies your behavior. Going back to my main point, the purpose of YouTube may not originally have been to help the modification and the molding of man, but it was certainly a tool which negative and nefarious entities seem to be using at the moment for that change to occur. And that change is to help the humans go into the post-human and transhuman world. And YouTube and the other social network platforms are trying to anesthetize the human so that his pain, his existential pain living in the world, is decreased. And so the information that he gets is one-sided. And to reinforce the ideals which are going around in society is to reinforce the ideals that the children are being fed in school, so when they come back, the parents are informed about what the children should be learning. For instance, transsexualism and sexual identity and gender fluidity. So YouTube is pushing those sorts of ideologies, which are then being mirrored by what's happening in school. And so because society seems to be saying it's okay, because YouTube's becoming the de facto voice for what society thinks, it therefore reaffirms what the school's doing, and the parents then think that perhaps it's okay what the school is doing. The parent never stops to think, because if the parent wishes to have alternative ideologies, it can't be found on YouTube. You'd have to go to a different platform like BitChute or Parler or Rumble, which are the platforms that I'm on, by the way, if you wish to go there. But the people that go to those platforms are being called racists, and that's another problem, and another thing that YouTube is doing. It's basically saying that if you dare to go to other platforms to look at other ideas, those are the places that white supremacists go to and hatred and anti-Semites go to. It's not. There's a lot of people on those other platforms which are saying things which are not right, or not from the right or the conservative, but just truthers, just people which are trying to understand something which is outside the comfort zone of the modern narrative, which YouTube believes it's the authoritative voice. It's not. It's a de facto voice, but it doesn't mean that it's the only voice or the correct voice.